Hello, my name is Anthony Andrews and I'm the co-founder and creative director of We Are Parable, and I'm very glad to be here with Ekwa Msangi, the director of Farewell Amor. Ekwa, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. All the better for speaking to you. I've got to say, Farewell Amor is definitely one of my films of the year. I was very lucky enough to see it in Berlin for the film festival in the cinema, as crazy as that sounds. So feel very blessed and very fortunate to be speaking to you. So
Thank you.
I wonder if we could start with you just perhaps giving us a bit of a synopsis about your film.
Sure. The film is a story of a family that's been separated for 17 years due to visa immigration issues. And at the top of the story, it starts with them finally, having resolved their visa issues. They're reuniting at JFK Airport in New York. And it takes us on the journey of following the first few weeks of their arrival in the US and them starting to relearn each other and themselves and using the tool of dance as a way to do that.
Fantastic. And I've got to say, I really one of the things that I really love about this film were some of the creative decisions that you made in this film. So let's talk about the first scene, for example. It's set in the airport and it's the reunion scene. And what engaged me straight away with this film is the fact that you started your film in a way that a number of films would end. So straight away, I was already thinking about, okay, well, what are you trying to tell me? I'm really trying to focus on the motivations behind the characters. Was it always your intention to really grab the audience from that beginning, from that start point?
Well, when I was imagining this film, it's something that stayed on my mind for many years. It's inspired by a relationship of an aunt and uncle who've been separated for many years due to visa immigration issues. But unlike my story, my real life relatives still have not been reunited. And so as I was thinking about this story, I always had this image of my uncle. If my auntie finally got her visa and she and cousin were able to show up, my uncle at the airport, at the arrivals hall, waiting for them, and what would he be thinking, and would he recognize them, and just trying to imagine like all the thoughts and feelings he'd be having as he stood there. And so that sort of being like the lead image that I always kept in my mind, I wanted to start us there.
Another thing that I thought was really engaging is the fact that you've broken this up into almost three separate acts from three characters looking at the same event from different perspectives. So I know that this film was an extension of your 2016 short Farewell Amor. So I'd love to know how the reasons for why you wanted to explore the world in a bit more detail.
Well, after Farewell Amor is the moment before. So
Mm.
it's the moment before Walter goes to the airport to get his family. And it's him at his apartment, with his girlfriend, and she's saying goodbye. And so after I had shot that and had been traveling the film in festivals, that story was kind of most present for me. So when I started writing the feature, I started writing with Walter in mind. But then it felt a little cliche to write a story about a guy who has an affair and he's trying to figure out what to do. And we've seen that story before. So then I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll do it from the daughter's perspective, because that's also something I could tap into. Even though I was born in the US, moved to East Africa with my family as a 5-year-old, and I came back around the same age as the character Sylvia does. So it was something I could write from. It was a place that I could write from. But, because her story has like a dance element to it, in the US, Black teenagers dancing, it kind of gets categorized as like a Black dance film. And I didn't want that. So I decided, okay, well, let me just do both of them and see how it goes. And so I had started writing the film from father and daughter's perspective. And then about 6 to 8 months into the process, it became pretty clear that the mom's story was the linchpin to both of their stories, and it didn't make sense to not have Esther's story in there. And so I came back and rounded it out with her story.
Yeah, definitely. And I think so. We talk about the three characters here, but I think there's a fourth character, and it's a character that kind of appears in many films, and it's something that I love about film. So it's the character of New York in many ways.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
I, I feel like New York was its own character in this film because Walter, Esther, and Sylvia all respond to New York in different ways. So I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about your decision to film to set this story in New York.
I mean, New York has been my home for over 20 years, and Brooklyn in particular. And so, for at least since what, 2004 or something, I moved to Brooklyn. And so, it is a place that I call home. And I love, one of the things that I love about Brooklyn is how, you can go into different neighborhoods and literally be in different countries where people don't even speak English sometimes. And, it's a whole different market, it's a whole different, just the signs are different, like the whole world is completely different. um and so to me, it just, as a location for where immigrants live, it just made sense. I mean, I could say probably the same thing about Queens, but I've never lived in Queens. I've lived in Brooklyn. And so I wanted to show, like, these people are part of this world. And in the same way that Spike Lee, for example, who's, a huge sort of hero and inspiration of mine as a filmmaker, has told stories about New York from a very specific perspective. I came to love Brooklyn because of watching films about Spike. And the people that he represents in Brooklyn are very specific people who do live here. And Woody Allen has his films about New York, and the films that he tells about, it's a different New York than Spike's New York. And, so I wanted to kind of give my offering of my New York, at least in New York, the slice of New York or the corner of New York that I know.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I wanted to talk about this being your first feature. So how did the experience change for you from, creating the short you made in 2016, telling a related story, to now making, a fully fledged feature? What was that experience like for you?
I mean, it's been quite the psychedelic experience getting the feature made. It's no secret that it is a huge challenge to get a feature made, especially as a Black filmmaker, a female filmmaker, a female Black filmmaker writing stories about African people, and trying to get US money to tell those stories. Like, those are all sort of different hurdles to cross. And I've, it's kind of been building my career slowly. The last, the prequel to this really served as a calling card. My producing partner, Haria Mohammed, and I had discussed, we're very strategic about how we wanted to use that as a way, as a vehicle to raise support for the feature. And we were able to get some really wonderful collaborators to work with us on that project so that we could really sort of show our chops as filmmakers. And it got us into different doors, literally, which was amazing and was very helpful because it took us a while to write the script, given the formatting, etc. And while we were working on the script and pitching the project, we were able to show the short and use that as a way to sort of keep moving the conversation forward.
Mhm.
But this is the first film that I've had that has premiered in the way that it has, to the kinds of audiences that it has, which is a much broader audience than I'm used to presenting my work to, which has been more regional, more sort of Black and African and diasporic audiences.
Yeah. And while we're on the subject of audiences, what's been the response to the film so far?
It's been overwhelmingly beautiful. I wasn't expecting it. As a filmmaker, more so than not, I've had the response of people not quite understanding the characters that I paint, just because they don't tend to fall into the stereotypical African characters. And so, and I kind of left that behind. It's like, okay, whatever, you'll catch up. It's fine.
Yeah,
These people exist. You'll figure it out. It's good. um, but it was so overwhelming and touching to get the response that we had. I mean, we premiered at Sundance, which we were so lucky to have had an actual in-person screening for, well, 6 in-person screenings for our film, and with completely different audience than I normally have shown my work to. And having people just in tears and feeling so connected to the story and to the characters and to the circumstances, even if their particular circumstances aren't immigration issues, but it's really a story just about being separated from the people that you love. And so it seems to have really hit a chord, and it's really beautiful. I appreciate it so much.
Definitely. And you touched on it earlier, but I think the great triumph of this film is, and it feels silly to say it, but I think it's quietly revolutionary in the sense that you're showing Black people living their lives, getting on, working, doing their thing, trying to support their families, and it feels like that shouldn't be revolutionary in 2020, but somehow it is. And
Yeah.
I think that's what I loved about it. There was no Black trauma to speak of. It was just a case of a family just trying to get through the best way they know how to. And I guess that was a real source of, I guess, a place where you wanted to move to tell this story.
Absolutely. I mean, as an African filmmaker who, has seen, there's been, I'm from East Africa, which has been used as a location for big Hollywood films for decades. And the films that get shot, have been shot there, tend to be, I mean, aside from fantasy, like Lara Croft Tomb Raider or something like that, I mean, African films or Hollywood films about Africans tends to be either the bucket of the most exceptional African that ever lived, or like Nelson Mandela, or the most wretched African that ever lived, and the child soldier, the Boko Haram, and so when you're telling stories only from like you know Jesus Christ stature, or absolute pity stature, there's so much in between. And it also assumes that we can't solve our own problems, or we don't have the will or drive or whatever to, nobody is actually working to solve those problems. And also the fact that, yeah, we have challenges like everybody else does, but that doesn't mean we don't live, we don't laugh, we don't love, we don't have families, we don't have dance, music, whatever things. Problems are problems, but people still keep moving forward. And so, yeah, I did, it's been a little bit of a personal mission of mine to tell stories about just regular ass people, just regular ass people, because we have a
Yeah,
lot of them.
and I think that's what I just loved about it. I love the fact that they didn't have to be magical or like like superheroes or anything like that. They were literally just people just getting on with life. And there were certain scenes that might seem like, I think the second time I watched it, I realized that these scenes of water, when he's in his element, when he's in that dance club and he meets his ex-girlfriend, but also the scenes when he's at the table and he's working hard trying to like make the bills all balance out and things like that, and you just realize the kind of internal balance that a lot of us have to live with. And I think that was just such a beautifully great way of telling that story, and about how hardworking and industrious he is.
Yeah, thank you. And that was also intentional too, of being able to show. I mean, I think um, not just for African films with African characters, but African Americans, diasporan Africans, specifically men. Like there's so the points of view and the way that men's characters tend to be presented are very limited. So it's either the gangster, or it's like the shady statesman, or it's the this, or um, they tend to not. I grew up around a lot of really excellent men. Um, with flaws, and they're human, but just people who are trying, who were trying to do their best, and to do their best by their families and all of those things. And I just want more stories about those people.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. Absolutely couldn't agree more. I wanted to see if we could talk about dance and the importance of dance in your film, because it does feel like the connective thread between the three characters. So I was hoping we could explore that together, and you could tell us a little bit about where that came from.
I'd love to. I have a bit of a dance background just as a social dancer, and I love a lot of different types of dance and a lot of different types of music. And Angolan dance and music is something that I've been practicing for a while. And the style that of dance that Walter practices, kuduro, I mean, sorry, kizomba and some semba, are Angolan couples dances. Kizomba is a very sensual, beautiful dance from Angola, which most people, when thinking of African dance, don't think of sensual dances, but we have some. And B, unlike other couples dances, the thing that I love about Kizomba is that it doesn't have a regular foot pattern. Salsa, bachata, you kind of do the same thing with your feet, regardless of which way your dance partner wants you to go. But with Kizomba, the person leading the dance is merely reacting to the music, and then the other person in the dance has to be connected to their partner in order to know which way they're trying to, move them. And therefore, if you don't have connection in the dance, there is no dance. And I just thought that was a really interesting metaphor for a relationship of these two people who used to be dance partners, who used to be in sync and in step, quite literally, and no longer are because of space and time and all of those things. And so the challenge that they're having together. And then with Kuduro, which is a style that Sylvia practices, is also from Angola, very energetic and high energy and kind of like from the streets, similar to a hip hop, but unlike, what we tend to see for hip hop or what we assume just based off of, the colorful characters who perform. They actually are talking about a lot of their music, a lot of the Kuduro songs tend to discuss like really interesting and like social issues and things that like young people are really concerned about, like domestic violence and what's happened after the war and money and all of these kinds of things. And it's really used as a tool by young people in Angola as a way to express themselves because they don't have a lot of platforms to talk about the things that they're concerned about. And again, for this character who's like a young African teenager who wouldn't have the space or permission to have a tantrum or curse her family or parents out or something like that, the only way that she would be able to discuss the things that she's concerned about would be through dance and music for her. And so I wanted to use dance and the music a little bit as like a third language for the characters to be able to give us a glimpse into their inner workings.
Mhm. Definitely. And talk to us about some of the scenes near, I don't want to give too much away, but the scenes with Sylvia near the end of the film. Can you tell us about how you filmed that? Because I always think that filming dance scenes are akin to filming any kind of action scenes, whether it's a fight scene or something else that's moving at quite a pace. Can you tell us a little bit about the experience of shooting something like that? And did you have experience of doing something like that before?
Oh, no, I did not.
Okay.
I did not.
Okay.
Well, I had a headache the entire day. That was those two scenes because there's one with Walter, at his location, and there's the Sylvia scene. Those ones were definitely the biggest scenes that we had. We had, 50 to 100 extras, and oh my God, it was incredible. It was incredible. I mean, we had a choreographer from Angola, Manuel Kanza, wonderful, wonderfully talented man who had been stalking for many years on Facebook. And it turned out he was in New York for the summer. And so he choreographed all the dancing in the film. And he had choreographed the dances for some of the other dancers in that scene, all of the other dancers in that scene, actually. Um, and we had all of our investors were there because they were super excited. So of course there's extra pressure because everyone's like, "Oh, what are we doing?"
Right, of course.
um, and we had a live DJ and the speakers and it was a little bit of a pain.
Mhm.
But my performers did incredibly. Jamie Lawson, who plays the character of Sylvia, she did that dance probably at least 5 times. But she was a trooper and she was ready. She had been preparing for weeks. And I was very relieved when it was done. And also that we were able to capture what we were able to capture. And I thought they did amazingly.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, it's a great scene. I really, and it really works as a climactic part of your film. Absolutely. So I want to talk about the time of when you're making this film. So I assume it was sort of early 2019, around that time that you're making that film.
It was late 2019.
Late
Yeah,
2019.
we shot in
Okay.
August of last
Oh
year.
wow. Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Well, I guess my question really is around, I guess, the political landscape in America. Thankfully changing, but I think when you were shooting this film, obviously, it's still a very divisive place. I mean, do you have any hopes that you would want your audience to take away from this film? given the political landscape in America?
Yeah, as you know, or I think I mean, the past 4 years in particular have been rough
Mm,
politically and specifically for people of color,
mm,
um, and for immigrants. And there've been a lot of really divisive, incorrect, hurtful, dangerous things said about immigrants, and just this idea of immigrants as a group of people who are here to take from us, who are taking our resources, who are raping our women and stealing our children, and making us poor, and just all of these horrible, incorrect things. Um, and I wanted to shine a light on the humanity of this group, of this faceless, shapeless group of immigrants that we keep talking about. Like, they're people? They're not robots who've been sent from Mars to come and destroy Earth. Like, they're actual people. And so, who are, like, putting a face on it, but like, what is it that immigrants have to give up in order to be here? Like, that's something we never talk about, and I don't think that anybody leaves their home country just because they prefer to live in exile in some strange land with nobody that they know and leave behind all their loved ones. Like, no one does that. People do it for other reasons. So what do they leave behind? What do they have to give up in order to be in the host country? And also, what do they bring? Host immigrants bring so much. And I mean, the US and the UK, like, really, really, are we talking about immigrants?
yeah, 100%, right?
Really
Yeah,
kind of have that conversation
yeah, yeah.
about what we've been taking from immigrants. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know that you're really qualified to do that. And so it's just really wanting to put a face on it without making it an issue driven film. Because I kind of hate issue driven films, or I'm a little tired of them. I mean, they have their purpose, and they can be very effective. But that wasn't the story that I wanted to tell. It wasn't about, like, bill number XYZ, or this particular law that was passed. Because there's so many laws, and there's so many things that have shaped the lives, oftentimes in a negative way, for immigrants and people of color all over the world. So it's really about just looking at what the cost, the human cost that some of these policies have on people, without just sort of the rhetoric around, just like, oh, run, they're terrible. you
Yeah,
know.
definitely, definitely. Are you hopeful about what may happen? Are you still kind of cynical? How are you feeling right now as a filmmaker working and living in America?
Whew. Hopeful, yes, definitely hopeful. I mean, I'm under no illusion that, like, it will be magical come January 21, and like everything will be back to normal. We still have a lot of things that we're dealing with, pandemic included, but also, this new administration, I'm sure will spend most of their time just cleaning up
Yeah.
all the things that, the can of worms that was unleashed by, the current occupant.
Mm.
So there is that, but politics is one thing, and I think for people of color everywhere, and certainly in this country, I mean, it's hard, and it's harder. It's just like, it's with every different administration, there are different challenges, and we've figured out ways of just coping with it. And some people are worse than others, and some challenges are bigger than others, but it's not like we've had challenge-free times. That's never really happened, not in this country. So I don't expect that to change. I do also feel hopeful, though, that with the kind of reckoning that we've had this year, the racial reckoning with the Black Lives Matter movement, and people really being forced to really kind of stop and think and examine current policies, current setups, current, in every aspect of life, not just police brutality. That is definitely one of them. But I mean, the entertainment industry is definitely having a lot of big conversations about the fact that, most of these agencies, agents, cinemas, whatever, musicians, make their money off of Black performers, make their money off of Black bodies, and yet do so little to respect, to protect, to, like, actually do work to protect those bodies that that make your living, and allow these bodies and these people to have their stories told. Like, I mean, an organization that I'm a member of, the Black TV and Film Collective, we wrote an open letter that actually had quite a bit of reach into the UK as well, of people talking about, like, the kinds of stories that we tell.
Yeah.
Those also really add to the environment that's created around seeing Black people as threats, whether they're immigrants or not, seeing Black people as less than, as, it's fine to mistreat them and different things like that. And what are you funding? Hollywood, what are you funding? Whatever the organization is. So I'm hopeful that, again, I don't expect that all of a sudden things are going to change overnight, because it's, when these things it's taken hundreds of years to entrench it into the system that it is. It's not going to change overnight, of course, but I am hopeful that people are willing, a little bit more willing, to have the uncomfortable conversations that need to be had to re-examine and readjust what our world looks like, in a lot of
Yeah.
different ways.
Can I just again congratulate you on such a brilliant piece of work, and thank you. And I really hope the film does really well. So Ekwa, thank you again.
Thank you so much for your support. I appreciate it.